I still remember the smirk on Walter's face when he said those words. Go ahead, walk away. You won't survive a week without me. He leaned against our marble kitchen island, arms crossed over his tailored suit, watching me pack a small bag with essentials. I stopped, looked him straight in the eyes, and dropped my keys on the counter with a metallic finality. 24 hours later, his phone was blowing up with frantic calls from his boss, his father, and now the bank. Turns out, when you push a desperate woman who knows all your secrets into a corner, you might just unleash something you never saw coming. Something that could bring your entire, carefully constructed world crashing down around you. My name is Madison Taylor, and until 2 months ago, I was just Walter Taylor's wife. Not a person, not a professional, just an accessory to his success. At least that's how he made me feel. We met at Northwestern University when I was 22, both of us ambitious business majors with big dreams. I fell hard for his confidence, his brilliance with numbers, and the way he seemed to have everything mapped out for our future. My parents had raised me in a modest suburban home in Wisconsin, teaching me the value of hard work and independence. But Walter came from money, old East Coast money, and he wore that privilege like a second skin. After graduation, we both landed jobs at Cooper Financial, a mid-sized investment firm in Chicago. I excelled in client relations and strategy development, quickly building a reputation as someone who could turn struggling accounts around. Walter focused on high, risk investments and mergers, his family connections opening doors that remained firmly closed to others. You're wasting your potential in client management, he told me one night over dinner, at an expensive restaurant I couldn't have afforded on my own salary. You should be thinking bigger. I was flattered by his interest in my career, not realizing it was the beginning of his subtle campaign to reshape me according to his vision. When he proposed a year later with a diamond ring so heavy it made my hand ache, I said yes without hesitation. The wedding was extravagant. His parents insisted on it with 400 guests, many of whom I'd never met. Our honeymoon in the Maldives felt like a dream, but looking back, I can see the warning signs I ignored. I've been thinking, Walter said as we lounged on a private beach. Maybe you should consider leaving Cooper and focusing on setting up our home. I'll be made partner soon, and we'll need to entertain. That's a full-time job in itself. I laughed, thinking he was joking. I love my job, Walter. I'm up for promotion next quarter. His smile tightened. Of course, just something to consider. The promotion never came. Somehow, the committee decided I wasn't ready, despite my performance metrics being the highest in my division. Walter consoled me with expensive gifts and suggested again that maybe this was a sign I should reprioritize. 6 months later, I discovered why I'd been passed over. Walter had quietly spoken to the partners, expressing concerns about my long-term commitment to the firm, hinting at family planning in our near future. I confronted him, furious at the betrayal. I was looking out for us, he insisted, his voice calm and reasonable as always. For our future family, you'll thank me someday. I didn't thank him, but I did leave Cooper Financial not to become his professional hostess, but to accept a position at Meridian Investments, a smaller but rapidly growing firm where Walter had no connections. He was livid, though he hid it behind a veneer of concern. Meridian is unstable, he warned. They won't last 5 years in this market. 3 years later, when Walter's father suffered a mild heart attack, everything changed again. The family pressured him to return to Boston to help run Taylor Holdings, the family business. He accepted without discussing it with me. We're moving to Boston, he announced one evening, as if it were already decided. What about my job, my career? I asked, stunned by his presumption. He looked genuinely confused. Madison, be realistic. Taylor Holdings is worth hundreds of millions. Your job at Meridian is quaint, but it's hardly comparable to what I'm being offered. I reluctantly agreed to the move, believing his promises about helping me find an equivalent position in Boston. Instead, I found myself slowly absorbed into the role of corporate wife, hosting dinner parties, and attending charity galas, while Walter climbed the ranks at Taylor Holdings. The final straw came after 5 years of marriage. I'd secretly applied for a director position at a competing investment firm in Boston, and to my shock, I was offered the job. The salary was substantial, not Walter level wealth, but enough for true independence. When I told him about the offer, expecting at least grudging support, his reaction floored me. "Absolutely not," he said flatly. "It would be a conflict of interest with Taylor Holdings. Besides, we've been talking about starting a family. This is hardly the time to take on a demanding new role." "We haven't been talking about starting a family," I corrected him. "You've been talking about it. I've been talking about rebuilding my career." His expression darkened. "Madison, be reasonable. You don't need to work. I provide everything you could possibly need. Accept purpose. Accept identity. Accept the career I worked my entire life for." The argument escalated until Walter finally revealed his true feelings. "Let's be honest," he said coldly. "You're not the financial genius you think you are. You had moderate success at a mediocre firm. Without me, without the Taylor name opening doors for you, you'd still be managing small accounts for middle-class clients. Go ahead, walk away. You won't survive a week without me." That's when I made my decision. I would show him exactly what I was capable of, without him, without his name, without his money. What he didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this moment for months, gathering information and making connections that would soon turn his smug certainty into panic. I checked into the Langham Hotel that night, knowing Walter wouldn't follow. His pride wouldn't allow it. Using the credit card he didn't know about, I booked a suite for 3 nights, time enough to execute the first phase of my plan. The next morning, I called Vivian Chen, an old colleague from Meridian who now worked at Blackstone Capital, one of the largest competitors to Taylor Holdings. "I've been expecting your call," Vivian said when we met for coffee. "The Boston financial world is smaller than Walter thinks." I slid a flash drive across the table. "Everything's here. The Taylor Holdings merger plans for Westfield Technologies, including the artificially deflated valuation reports Walter created to drive down the purchase price, plus documentation of 3 instances where client funds were temporarily diverted to boost quarterly reports." Vivian's eyes widened. "Madison, this is explosive. How did you get this?" "I've been Walter's emergency contact and proxy for 5 years. He's had me sign countless documents without explanation. What he forgot is that I actually read them, and I understand exactly what they mean." I took a sip of my coffee. "I'm not asking Blackstone to do anything illegal or unethical. I just want a position that reflects my abilities and access to the clients who might be interested in knowing how Taylor Holdings conducts business." 3 hours later, I was sitting across from Richard Blackstone himself, outlining my knowledge of Taylor Holdings' vulnerabilities and my strategy for legally exploiting them to Blackstone's advantage. By the end of the day, I had a corner office and a senior director title with a compensation package that made my abandoned position at Meridian look like pocket change. That evening, my phone lit up with Walter's name for the first time. I let it go to voicemail, then listened with growing satisfaction. "Madison, I just had a very strange call from Andrew Westfield. He's reconsidering the terms of our acquisition. Something about concerns regarding our valuation process. Call me immediately." I didn't call him back. The next morning, I arrived at Blackstone Capital at 7:30, dressed in a new Armani suit I'd purchased the previous afternoon. My assistant, assigned by Richard himself, handed me a detailed portfolio of Taylor Holdings' major clients. "Mr. Blackstone thought you might want to make some introductory calls," she said with a knowing smile. By 10 o'clock, I'd spoken with the investment directors at Westfield Technologies and 2 other companies in negotiations with Taylor Holdings. By noon, all 3 had expressed interest in hearing Blackstone's alternative proposals. By 3, Walter had called 17 times. I was in a meeting with the Blackstone strategy team when my phone lit up with a different name. Franklin Taylor, Walter's father, and the patriarch of the Taylor Empire. "Madison, what the hell is going on?" Franklin demanded when I finally took his call. "Walter says you've left him, and somehow torpedoed the Westfield deal in the process." "I've accepted a position more aligned with my skills, Franklin," I replied calmly. "As for Westfield, perhaps they've simply realized there are better options than the predatory terms Walter was offering." There was a long silence before Franklin spoke again, his voice lower and more controlled. "Whatever you think you're doing, you're playing a dangerous game. The Taylor family has deep connections in this industry. Yes, I know all about those connections, including the ones with Senator Williams regarding the offshore accounts. Would you like me to elaborate further, or would you prefer to have that conversation in private?" Another silence, longer this time. "What do you want, Madison?" "Nothing from you or Walter. I'm exactly where I want to be." After ending the call, I sat in my new office, looking out over the Boston skyline, feeling a mix of exhilaration and fear. I knew the Taylors wouldn't take this lying down. Walter's pride was wounded, and Franklin's empire was threatened. Their retaliation would come swiftly and without mercy. What I didn't expect was how soon it would start. As I prepared to leave the office, my assistant rushed in with alarming news. "Miss Taylor, there's a problem with your hotel suite. The Langham just called your belongings have been removed, and your reservation has been canceled." I felt a cold certainty about what had happened. Let me guess, Mr. Taylor informed them that his credit card had been used fraudulently? "Yes, and he's in the lobby downstairs right now, demanding to see you." I should have anticipated this. Walter controlled our joint accounts and could track any credit card in my name. What he didn't know was that I'd been systematically building my own financial resources for the past 2 years, siphoning small amounts from our household account into a separate bank entirely. "Tell security not to let him up," I instructed, pulling out my phone to call Grace, my college roommate who now owned a successful interior design firm in Boston. An hour later, I was settled into Grace's guest bedroom, my few belongings rescued from the hotel's security office before Walter could claim them. "He really thought you'd come crawling back just because he canceled your hotel room?" Grace asked incredulously as we shared a bottle of wine in her stylish Beacon Hill apartment. "Walter has always believed money equals control," I explained, "and until yesterday, he controlled all of it." My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Meridian closed your 401k account today on fraud allegations. Taylor Holdings Legal filed preliminary injunctions against your employment at Blackstone. This is just the beginning. Come home and we'll forget this happened. W." I showed Grace the message, my hands shaking slightly. "They're trying to cut me off completely." Grace's expression hardened. "Then we make sure you cut them off first." I arrived at Blackstone Capital the next morning to find Richard Blackstone waiting in my office with the company's chief legal officer. "Taylor Holdings filed for an emergency injunction claiming you've misappropriated confidential information," Richard explained, sliding a document across my desk. "Their lawyers delivered this at 7 this morning." I scanned the filing, noting the dramatic language about corporate espionage and breach of fiduciary duty. The document claimed I had stolen proprietary information while acting as Walter's proxy at Taylor Holdings. "This is legally baseless," I said, more confidently than I felt. "I've never been an employee of Taylor Holdings, just the wife of an executive. I signed all documents in my personal capacity as Walter's spouse, not as a corporate officer. There's no non-compete or confidentiality agreement they can enforce against me." The legal officer nodded. "That's our assessment as well, but they'll drag this through court to try to prevent you from working here." "Which is why we need to move quickly," Richard added. "How soon can you arrange meetings with the 3 clients you contacted yesterday?" "Today, if necessary," I replied. Richard smiled. "Good. Because Taylor Holdings just called an emergency board meeting for this afternoon." Franklin Taylor sounded concerned. I spent the morning in back-to-back calls with potential clients, focusing on those who had expressed dissatisfaction with Taylor Holdings in the past. By lunchtime, I had appointments with 5 major investment directors for the following day. At 2:30, my assistant interrupted me during a strategy session. "Miss Taylor, there's a situation in reception. Your husband is demanding to see you, and he's threatening to call the police if we don't let him in." Richard raised an eyebrow. "Would you like security to handle this, or would you prefer to speak with him?" I considered my options. Avoiding Walter would only escalate the situation, but confronting him on his terms would put me at a disadvantage. "Have security escort him to the small conference room on this floor," I decided. "And please have them stay within calling distance." Walter looked both angry and disheveled when I entered the conference room, something I'd never seen before. His perfectly tailored suit was creased, and he hadn't shaved. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he demanded without preamble. "Working," I replied simply. "Remaining, standing near the door, something I should have been doing for the past 5 years. You've stolen confidential information and given it to our biggest competitor. That's corporate espionage, Madison. You could go to prison." "I haven't stolen anything, Walter. I've simply used my own knowledge and expertise to secure appropriate employment. The fact that I'm intimately familiar with Taylor Holdings' business practices is an unfortunate consequence of your insistence that I be involved in company matters when it suited you." His face reddened. "The Westfield deal is falling apart because of you. My father is questioning my judgment. The board is in panic mode." "That sounds like a Taylor Holdings problem, not a Madison problem." Walter slammed his fist on the table. "This is our life you're destroying. Everything I've built, everything we have, everything you have," I corrected him. "You made that distinction very clear when you said I wouldn't survive a week without you." He ran a hand through his hair, visibly trying to control himself. When he spoke again, his voice was calmer, almost gentle. "Madison, please, come home. We can work this out. I was angry and said things I didn't mean. You've made your point." For a moment, I almost wavered. 5 years of marriage, of shared history, of believing we were building something together. But then I remembered all the small humiliations, the dismissed ambitions, the subtle undermining of my confidence. "No, Walter, I haven't even begun to make my point." His expression hardened. "Then you leave me no choice. I'm filing for divorce, and I'll make sure you get nothing. The prenup is airtight, you know that." "Go ahead," I replied, moving toward the door. "But before you do, you might want to check your personal email. I sent you something just before this meeting." Back at my desk, I counted down silently. 3 minutes later, my phone exploded with calls and texts not just from Walter, but from Franklin and the Taylor Holdings General Counsel. What I'd sent Walter was a simple document. Proof that he had backdated company records during a federal regulatory investigation 2 years earlier. It wasn't the most damaging information I had, just a warning shot to demonstrate the depth of my knowledge. "Miss Taylor," my assistant called through the intercom. "The CEO of First Republic Bank is on line 1 for you. He says it's urgent." I picked up the phone, curious about this unexpected call. James Harrington was a longtime ally of the Taylor family and a major investor in their holdings. "Madison," he said without introduction, "I understand you've recently taken a position at Blackstone. I'd like to discuss some concerns regarding Taylor Holdings' handling of certain investment accounts." Privately. By the end of the call, I had arranged a confidential meeting with one of the most powerful bankers in Boston, a man who controlled funding lines crucial to Taylor Holdings' operations. As I prepared to leave the office that evening, Richard stopped by with unexpected news. The board called. "They're impressed with your work so far and concerned about the Taylor Holdings legal threats. They've decided to accelerate your promotion. Effective immediately, you're our new Executive Director of Strategic Acquisitions, with a seat on the Executive Committee." I stared at him, momentarily speechless. That's remarkably fast. Richard's smile was calculating. "We recognize talent and opportunity when we see it, and right now you represent both in abundance." He handed me a folder. Your new compensation package. I think you'll find it appropriate. The figure on the top page made me blink. It was more than double what we'd initially discussed, approaching Walter's salary at Taylor Holdings. One more thing, Richard added. The security team found this tracking device under your car this afternoon. He placed a small black disc on my desk. Apparently, someone wants to know your movements. We've taken the liberty of enhancing your security arrangements. As I drove to Grace's apartment that night, I noticed the discreet black sedan following at a careful distance, Blackstone Security, keeping watch. The stakes had just risen dramatically, and I knew the real battle was only beginning. The most surprising call came at 11 that night. The display showed unknown, but I recognized the voice immediately. Madison, it's Eleanor Taylor. Walter's mother had always been a cipher to me, perfectly poised, unfailingly polite, but ultimately unknowable. In 5 years of marriage, we'd never had a conversation that went beyond social pleasantries. I understand you and Walter are having difficulties, she continued, her patrician voice giving nothing away. That's one way to put it, I replied cautiously. Franklin is beside himself. Walter is making rash decisions. The board is asking uncomfortable questions. A pause. You've created quite the situation. I didn't create this situation, Eleanor. I simply refused to continue accepting it. Another pause. Longer this time. I've always wondered when you would reach that point. Her words caught me completely off guard. I'm sorry, Madison. I've been watching you these past 5 years. Watching my son and husband systematically dismantle your ambitions while using your intelligence to further their own. It was only a matter of time before you either surrendered completely or fought back. I sat in stunned silence as she continued. Meet me tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock, at the Gardner Museum Cafe. Come alone. There are things you should know about Taylor Holdings that even Walter isn't aware of. The line went dead, leaving me staring at my phone in confusion. Was this another Taylor family tactic? A trap to discredit me somehow? Or was Eleanor Taylor offering me an alliance I never expected? The Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum was nearly empty when I arrived the next morning, its peaceful courtyard a stark contrast to the turmoil of my life. Eleanor Taylor sat alone at a corner table in the cafe, elegant as always in a tailored navy suit, her silver hair perfectly styled. Thank you for coming, she said as I sat across from her. I wasn't sure you would. Curiosity won out over caution, I admitted. Why did you want to meet? Eleanor's perfectly manicured hands wrapped around her teacup. Because Taylor Holdings is built on sand, and Franklin and Walter are too arrogant to see it. But you've already figured that out, haven't you? She opened a slim portfolio and pushed it across the table. Inside were financial statements and board minutes dating back 15 years before Walter had even joined the company. Franklin has been manipulating the books for decades, she explained as I flipped through the documents. Inflating assets, hiding losses, bribing regulators. Walter knows some of it, but not the extent. I looked up, meeting her steady gaze. Why are you showing me this? Because I'm tired, Madison. Tired of watching my husband and son destroy everything my grandfather built. Taylor Holdings was once an honorable institution. Now it's a house of cards waiting to collapse. And you think I can prevent that collapse? Eleanor's laugh was brittle. No, dear. I think you're going to cause it. And frankly, that might be for the best. She explained that Taylor Holdings was facing a liquidity crisis far worse than anyone outside the family knew. The aggressive acquisition strategy Walter had championed had left them overextended and vulnerable. If even one major deal fell through, the entire structure could unravel. Franklin is 72, Eleanor continued. He's been planning to hand control to Walter next year. But Walter isn't ready, he never has been. He plays at business, using his father's connections and other people's ideas. She fixed me with a pointed look. Your ideas, often enough. I thought about the investment strategies Walter had presented as his own over the years, the client relationships he'd claimed credit for building. What do you want from me, Eleanor? Nothing you weren't already planning to do. Continue your work at Blackstone. Use what you know. Just understand that when Taylor Holdings begins to crumble, it won't just be Walter and Franklin who suffer. There are hundreds of employees, thousands of investors. I understood her message clearly. Destroy Walter and Franklin if I must, but try to minimize the collateral damage. One last thing, Eleanor said as we prepared to leave. Check the ownership structure of the Cambridge waterfront development. You'll find it illuminating. I barely made it to my office by 9, my mind racing with implications of Eleanor's revelations. Richard was waiting with news of his own. James Harrington called. First Republic is reconsidering their credit lines to Taylor Holdings pending a comprehensive audit. That would cripple their operations, I said, understanding the gravity of this development. They rely on those credit facilities for everyday business. Richard nodded. Apparently, an anonymous source provided some concerning documentation to their risk management department. I didn't have to ask who that source might be. Eleanor Taylor was playing a deeper game than any of us had realized. Before I could process this further, my assistant rushed in. Miss Taylor, there's a situation. Your personal bank accounts have been frozen. The bank received a fraud alert from Taylor Holdings claiming unauthorized transfers. Walter was escalating his financial warfare, trying to cut off my remaining resources. What he didn't know was that I'd anticipated this move and established a separate account under my maiden name at a bank with no connections to Taylor Holdings. There's more, my assistant continued. Someone leaked your personnel file from Meridian Investments to the financial press, including allegations of client mismanagement. This was a direct attack on my professional reputation, exactly where Walter knew I was most vulnerable. I pulled up the financial news sites to find my name already trending, with speculation about my qualifications and integrity. Richard, I said, turning to my new boss, I need to address this immediately. Can we call a press conference? He shook his head. Not yet. Let's be strategic. First, we need to contact the clients you'll be meeting today and assure them these allegations are baseless. By midday, I'd spoken with all 5 clients, transparently addressing the smear campaign. To my relief, all maintained their interest in Blackstone's proposals. Then came the most unexpected call of all. Madison Taylor? The voice was unfamiliar, professional. This is she. This is Special Agent Caroline Dawson with the Securities and Exchange Commission. We're investigating certain transactions at Taylor Holdings, and your name has come up repeatedly in our review. We'd like to speak with you at your earliest convenience. My heart raced. May I ask what this is regarding specifically? We're looking into possible securities fraud, market manipulation, and misrepresentation to investors. Based on our preliminary investigation, you may have information relevant to our inquiry. I arranged to meet with Agent Dawson the following morning, then immediately called Blackstone's legal department. This development changed everything. If the SEC was already investigating Taylor Holdings, my knowledge could be the key to their case and potentially my own protection. As the day progressed, the financial warfare intensified. Walter filed a motion to freeze all my assets pending divorce proceedings. Franklin Taylor called major clients personally, spreading rumors about my mental instability and vindictive behavior. The Taylor Holdings PR team issued a statement expressing concern for Mrs. Taylor's well-being and suggesting I was under undue influence from Blackstone executives. I was fighting on multiple fronts, and the pressure was mounting. Then I remembered Eleanor's parting suggestion about the Cambridge waterfront development. After an hour of intensive research, I discovered what she wanted me to find. The development was officially owned by a complex network of shell companies, but the ultimate beneficiary wasn't Taylor Holdings. It was a private trust controlled by Franklin Taylor personally. He had been siphoning prime assets from the company into his personal holdings for years, effectively looting the very institution he claimed to protect. I was still processing this revelation when security called to alert me that Walter had been spotted in the building, somehow having bypassed the front desk. "He's on his way up," the security officer warned. "We're in pursuit, but he's moving quickly." I barely had time to prepare before Walter burst into my office, his face contorted with rage, and something else, fear. "What have you done?" he demanded, slamming the door behind him. "The SEC? Harrington pulling our credit lines? My father's private affairs? You've gone too far, Madison." I remained seated, forcing myself to appear calmer than I felt. "I haven't gone anywhere, Walter. I'm exactly where I belong, doing what I should have been doing all along." "They're freezing our personal accounts now," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "Do you understand what you've started? This isn't just business anymore. This is our lives." "No, Walter. This is my life. The one you tried to convince me I couldn't have without you." Security arrived, ready to remove him, but I held up a hand to stop them. There was something I needed to say first. "You told me I wouldn't survive a week without you. It's been 3 days, and I'm not just surviving, I'm thriving. Meanwhile, your empire is crumbling around you. So tell me, Walter, which one of us can't live without the other?" The look on his face, shock, giving way to dawning realization, was something I would never forget. As security escorted him out, my phone lit up with an email notification. It was from James Harrington at First Republic Bank with a single line of text. "Cambridge waterfront documentation received. All Taylor Holdings accounts under review, effective immediately." Eleanor Taylor had made her move, using me as her instrument of justice. The house of cards was beginning to fall. The next morning, I sat across from Special Agent Dawson in a sterile conference room at the SEC's Boston office. For 3 hours, I detailed everything I knew about Taylor Holdings' questionable business practices, providing documentation where I had it, and directing investigators toward evidence I knew existed but couldn't access. "You understand this could result in criminal charges for multiple executives, including your husband," Agent Dawson said as we concluded. "I understand, and I'm prepared to testify if necessary." When I emerged from the SEC offices, I found Richard Blackstone waiting in the lobby, his normally composed face betraying concern. "The Taylor family has gone nuclear," he informed me as we walked to his car. "They're claiming you stole proprietary algorithms and client lists. They've filed complaints with every regulatory body imaginable, and they're threatening to sue Blackstone for hundreds of millions in damages." "It's desperation," I replied, more confidently than I felt. "They know what the SEC will find, and they're trying to discredit me before it becomes public." Richard's driver navigated through Boston traffic as we discussed strategy. Blackstone wasn't backing down. In fact, the board had authorized an aggressive expansion targeting Taylor Holdings' core client base. "There's something else," Richard said as we neared the office. "Walter Taylor called an emergency press conference for noon today. Our sources suggest he's going to publicly accuse you of corporate espionage and possibly more personal allegations." I checked my watch. 11:15. Less than an hour to prepare a response. Let him, I decided. Every false accusation he makes becomes another nail in his coffin once the SEC findings become public. Back at my office, my assistant handed me a stack of messages. Among them was a note that made my blood run cold. "Miss Taylor," your father called. "He says your mother has been receiving concerning phone calls from someone claiming to be from Taylor Holdings, asking about your childhood medical history. They were digging into my past, looking for anything to use against me." Walter knew I'd struggled with anxiety in college following my mother's cancer diagnosis. Was he desperate enough to use that to question my mental stability? I immediately called my parents in Wisconsin. "They've been relentless," my father explained. "Calling neighbors, former teachers, even your old doctors. Your mother is beside herself with worry." "I'm so sorry," I told them, guilt washing over me. "I never meant for you to be dragged into this." Madison Jane Parker, my father said firmly, using my full maiden name. You have nothing to apologize for. Your mother and I raised you to stand up for yourself, and that's exactly what you're doing. We're proud of you. His words gave me strength, just when I needed it most. I arranged for Blackstone Security to contact my parents' local police department and ensure they had protection. At 11:45, my assistant rushed in with breaking news. Taylor Holdings stock had dropped 15% in the morning trading session, following rumors of the SEC investigation. There's more, she added. 3 board members have resigned, effective immediately, and James Harrington is giving a statement to the financial press right now. I turned on the television in my office to see the distinguished CEO of First Republic Bank addressing a room full of reporters. After conducting an internal review of our relationship with Taylor Holdings, First Republic Bank has made the difficult decision to suspend all credit facilities pending a comprehensive audit. This decision was made in accordance with our fiduciary responsibility to our shareholders and depositors. The impact was immediate. Taylor Holdings stock plummeted another 12% before trading was temporarily halted. Franklin Taylor was reportedly rushed to the hospital with chest pains, and Walter's scheduled press conference was abruptly canceled. Instead, the Taylor Holdings General Counsel appeared briefly to read a terse statement. Taylor Holdings categorically denies any wrongdoing and will cooperate fully with any regulatory inquiries. We believe these allegations are part of a coordinated attack orchestrated by competitors seeking to damage our reputation. We will defend our company vigorously and pursue all legal remedies against those responsible for spreading false information. By late afternoon, the financial press had pieced together most of the story. My departure from Walter, my new position at Blackstone, the SEC investigation, and First Republic's withdrawal of support. The narrative was shifting from Walter's initial portrayal of me as a vindictive wife to a more complex picture of a financial professional who had uncovered potential wrongdoing. When the markets closed, Taylor Holdings stock had lost nearly 30% of its value in a single day. The company's market capitalization had decreased by over $400 million. As I prepared to leave the office, Eleanor Taylor called again. "You've exceeded even my expectations," she said, her voice betraying no emotion. "Franklin is stable, but confined to bed rest. The board is in emergency session, and Walter is. Well, Walter is finally facing consequences." "Was this your plan all along?" I asked. "To use me as the trigger for Taylor Holdings' collapse?" "Let's say I recognized an opportunity when it presented itself. You were the catalyst this situation needed. I simply helped guide events in the most productive direction." "Productive for whom, Eleanor?" Her laugh was soft and knowing. "For justice, Madison, and perhaps for both of us." Before I could press her further, she added, "The board will announce a leadership change tomorrow morning. They've asked me to step in as interim chairperson while they conduct a comprehensive review. My first act will be to propose a settlement with Blackstone and with you personally." I was stunned. "You're taking control of Taylor Holdings?" "Someone needs to salvage what can be saved. It might as well be the person who's been silently keeping it afloat for the past 20 years, while the men took the credit." After ending the call, I sat in my darkened office, watching the city lights come on across Boston. In just 4 days, I had gone from Walter Taylor's decorative wife to a key player in one of the biggest financial dramas in the city's recent history. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Releasing additional documentation to SEC tomorrow morning. Prepare for significant media attention. E." Eleanor was making sure I knew the next phase of her plan. She wasn't just taking control of Taylor Holdings. She was going to publicly expose her husband and son's misdeeds, using me as both shield and sword. As I drove to Grace's apartment, I noticed the black sedan still following discreetly my Blackstone security detail. For the first time, I wondered if they were protecting me from the Taylors, or protecting Blackstone's new asset, me. Grace was waiting with dinner and a bottle of champagne. "I saw the news," she said, giving me a fierce hug. "You're trending on Twitter, and half the financial world is trying to figure out who Madison Taylor really is." I sank onto her couch, suddenly exhausted. "I'm still trying to figure that out myself." Grace handed me a glass of champagne and sat beside me. "Well, whoever she is, she just brought a financial dynasty to its knees in less than a week. I'd say that's a pretty good start." We toasted to new beginnings, but as we ate dinner, my phone continued to buzz with calls and messages, reporters seeking comments, former colleagues offering support or looking for insider information, and finally, a text from Walter. "This isn't over, Madison. You've destroyed everything we built together. Whatever Eleanor has promised you, remember she's a Taylor too. She'll betray you, just like you betrayed me." I showed Grace the message. "He still doesn't get it, does he?" she said. "This was never about destroying anything. This was about you building something of your own." She was right. In his desperate attempt to control me, Walter had inadvertently pushed me to discover my true power, not as his wife, but as his equal, perhaps even as his superior. The next day would bring new challenges, new battles. But for the first time in years, I was truly excited about my future. The following morning, everything changed again. I woke to find Taylor Holdings dominating the financial news. Eleanor Taylor takes control amid fraud allegations. SEC expands investigation into Taylor Holdings. Franklin and Walter Taylor step down pending internal review. Eleanor had moved faster than anyone anticipated, leveraging the board's panic to secure her position. Her first public statement was a masterpiece of controlled damage. Taylor Holdings acknowledges that serious concerns have been raised regarding certain business practices under previous leadership. As interim chairperson, I have ordered a comprehensive review and pledge full cooperation with regulatory authorities. We are committed to transparency, accountability, and rebuilding trust with our clients and investors. No direct mention of her husband or son, but the message was clear. Eleanor was separating herself from their actions while positioning herself as the company's savior. When I arrived at Blackstone, Richard called me into an emergency executive committee meeting. The room fell silent as I entered 20 senior executives, all watching me with a mixture of respect and wariness. "Madison," Richard began, "the board has received a settlement offer from Taylor Holdings. They're proposing to drop all legal claims against Blackstone and you personally in exchange for our agreement not to actively solicit their existing clients for 90 days. I considered this carefully. Eleanor is buying time to stabilize the company before we can poach their major accounts." "Exactly. The question is, do we accept?" All eyes turned to me. 4 days ago, I had been Walter Taylor's wife. Now I was helping decide the fate of the company that bore his name. "Accept the settlement," I advised, "but with one condition. Full indemnification for me against any future claims by any Taylor Holdings stakeholder, including family members." "Eleanor will agree. She needs this resolved quickly." Richard nodded. "Consider it done." As the meeting concluded, my assistant appeared with urgent news. The SEC is expanding its investigation to include potential personal financial crimes by Walter Taylor. They're executing a search warrant at your former residence right now. I rushed back to my office and turned on the financial news to see reporters gathered outside our Walters Beacon Hill townhouse as federal agents carried out boxes of documents. My phone rang with a Boston police detective requesting a meeting. Apparently, during their search, agents had discovered evidence suggesting Walter had been monitoring my personal emails and phone calls for months before our separation, a potential criminal violation. The walls were closing in on Walter from all sides. What had begun as a professional conflict had escalated into potential criminal charges. I felt a complicated mix of vindication and sorrow. Despite everything, we had shared 5 years of marriage, and I had once loved him deeply. By midday, another bombshell dropped. Documents had been anonymously delivered to several financial news outlets detailing how Franklin Taylor had systematically diverted company assets to personal holdings over a 15-year period. The Cambridge waterfront development was just the tip of the iceberg. Taylor Holdings stock was suspended from trading pending further disclosures. Market analysts were predicting the company might not survive in its current form. Then came the call I least expected. My assistant put it through with obvious hesitation. "Madison, it's Walter." His voice sounded hollow, defeated. In the background, I could hear what sounded like airport announcements. "Where are you?" I asked. "About to board a flight to Zurich. My mother's arranged for me to take a temporary consulting position with a Swiss firm. She thinks it's best if I'm out of the country while things settle." She's probably right. There was a long pause before he spoke again. "I underestimated you. I always thought your kindness was weakness, your compromise was lack of ambition. I was wrong." I said nothing, waiting. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he continued, "just understanding. Everything I did was to build the life I thought we both wanted." "No, Walter. Everything you did was to build the life you wanted, with me as an accessory. You never asked what I wanted. And now you have it," he said, bitterness creeping into his voice. "My family's company in shambles, my father's health broken, my career in ruins. Congratulations. That's not what I wanted either. All I ever wanted was respect, as your wife, as your equal, as a professional in my own right. You could never give me that." The announcement of his flight boarding came through clearly. "I have to go," he said. "For what it's worth, you've certainly proven you can survive without me. I'm not sure I can say the same." After he hung up, I sat motionless, processing his words. In his own way, Walter had finally acknowledged what he'd refused to see throughout our marriage. My capability, my strength, my independence. That afternoon, I received another unexpected visitor. Franklin Taylor, against medical advice, had come to Blackstone to see me. Security escorted the diminished patriarch to my office, his normally commanding presence reduced by recent events and health concerns. "You've destroyed my life's work," he said without preamble, lowering himself carefully into a chair opposite my desk. "No, Franklin, you did that yourself, along with Walter. I simply exposed what was already broken." His eyes, so like Walter's, fixed on me with cold intensity. "Eleanor has betrayed the family, and you've helped her do it. Eleanor is saving what can be saved of Taylor Holdings. Without her intervention, there would be nothing left." Franklin's laugh was bitter. "And you believe she's doing this out of some noble purpose? Eleanor has wanted control of the company for decades. She's using you to achieve what she couldn't do openly." "Perhaps," I acknowledged. "But unlike you and Walter, Eleanor recognized my value. She treated me as an ally, not a possession." He studied me with new awareness. "You know, I always told Walter he was lucky to have you. I just didn't realize how dangerous you could be." "Not dangerous, Franklin. Underestimated. There's a difference." After he left, I received a call from Richard. The Taylor Holdings board had unanimously approved Eleanor's settlement offer, including my full indemnification. The legal war was over, but a new challenge was just beginning. Richard informed me that the executive committee had a special assignment. They wanted me to lead a task force to identify Taylor Holdings clients most likely to leave in the coming months and develop targeted strategies to bring them to Blackstone. "In other words," I clarified, "you want me to dismantle my former family's company piece by piece." "Business is business, Madison," Richard replied smoothly, "and you're uniquely positioned for this task." That evening, as I worked late in my office, Eleanor Taylor made one final call. "The board has made its decision," she informed me. "Taylor Holdings will be broken up. The wealth management division will remain under the family name, but the investment banking and commercial lending operations will be sold off separately." "And your role in this new arrangement?" I asked. I picked up the phone, curious about this unexpected call. James Harrington was a longtime ally of the Taylor family and a major investor in their holdings. And Walter? Walter will remain in Switzerland for the foreseeable future. When he returns, there will be a place for him in the new organization, a minor one, with appropriate supervision. After we ended the call, I looked out at the Boston skyline, the lights of the financial district gleaming in the darkness. Somewhere out there was the Taylor Holdings building, where Walter's name was still on the door of the office I'd never been allowed to enter. In less than a week, I had gone from being defined by my husband's name to redefining it completely. Taylor Holdings would never be the same, and neither would I. As I gathered my things to leave, my assistant delivered a small package that had arrived by courier. Inside was a vintage Cartier watch, a women's model from the 1942, with a simple note, "To new beginnings, E." Eleanor Taylor had played the long game, and so had I. Now we were both emerging victorious, though in very different ways. I'll retain control of the wealth management business. It's all I ever wanted. The stable, legitimate part of the operation. Franklin built an empire on sand. I'm salvaging the foundation. The Taylor Holdings acquisition is now complete, I announced, displaying the final figures on the screen behind me. With this transaction, Blackstone has successfully incorporated 70% of their former client base and 48% of their assets under management. The remaining wealth management division, still operated by Eleanor Taylor, has entered into a strategic partnership with us that guarantees client referrals and resource sharing for the next decade. Richard Blackstone, now approaching retirement, nodded in approval. And the financial results? Our revenue has increased 33% year over year. Profitability is up 27%. And our market capitalization has nearly doubled. The room erupted in applause. What had begun as a desperate act of self-preservation had transformed into one of the most successful business strategies in Blackstone's history and made me its youngest ever managing partner. After the meeting, I returned to my new corner office larger than Richard's, with panoramic views of Boston Harbor. On my desk stood a framed magazine cover from 6 months earlier. The Takeover Queen, How Madison Parker Reshaped Boston's Financial Landscape. I had legally reclaimed my maiden name as part of the divorce settlement, shedding the last vestige of my connection to Walter and the Taylor dynasty. My assistant interrupted my thoughts. "Your 3 o'clock is here. And Grace called to confirm dinner tonight to celebrate your anniversary." Not my wedding anniversary. That date had passed unnoticed months ago. Today marked 1 year since I had dropped my keys on Walter's kitchen counter and walked away from a life of comfortable subordination. My 3 o'clock appointment was with a young financial analyst who reminded me of myself a decade earlier, brilliant, ambitious, and underestimated by her male colleagues. I had started a mentorship program at Blackstone specifically to identify and support talented women in finance. "Miss Parker," she began nervously as she entered my office. "Thank you so much for this opportunity." "Madison, please," I corrected her with a smile. "And the opportunity is mine. I've been watching your work on the Henderson account. Your analysis was exceptional." The young woman straightened slightly, confidence replacing anxiety. "Thank you. I have some additional ideas about the portfolio restructuring if you'd be interested in hearing them." "That's exactly why you're here," I told her, gesturing toward the sitting area by the window. "I believe you may have solutions the senior analysts haven't considered." As we talked, I found myself reflecting on how much had changed in a year. Walter was still in Switzerland, working for a small private bank in a role carefully orchestrated by Eleanor to keep him occupied and out of trouble. Franklin had retired to their family compound on Martha's Vineyard, his health never fully recovering from the stress of the company's dissolution. And Eleanor? Eleanor had achieved her lifelong ambition, running the streamlined Taylor Wealth Management business with quiet efficiency and immaculate compliance. We met quarterly for tea, a ritual that puzzled outsiders but made perfect sense to us. We had been unlikely allies in a battle that transformed us both. My parents had moved to Boston at my insistence, taking up residence in a comfortable brownstone not far from my new penthouse apartment. After years of watching me subordinate my dreams to Walter's ambitions, they were now witness to my success on my own terms. After my meeting, I received a message that had become increasingly common. Another financial publication requesting an interview about my journey from corporate wife to corporate powerhouse. I had declined most such requests, preferring to let my work speak for itself. But this one was different. Forbes was planning a special issue on women transforming traditional industries. I decided to accept. Not for personal glory, but because somewhere, another woman was being told she couldn't survive without a man's approval, a man's name, a man's permission to succeed. She needed to know that was a lie. That evening, as Grace and I celebrated with champagne at Boston's finest restaurant, she raised her glass in a toast. "To the woman who built an empire from a single act of courage," she said. I smiled, clinking my glass against hers. "To never letting anyone tell you what you're worth." Later that night, I stood on my balcony overlooking the city, thinking about Walter's parting words at the airport a year earlier. "You've certainly proven you can survive without me." I'm not sure I can say the same. He had been right. I hadn't just survived. I had thrived, flourished, exceeded every expectation, including my own. And in doing so, I had discovered something profound. The greatest wealth isn't measured in dollars or properties or possessions. It's measured in the freedom to determine your own value. My journey had begun with a challenge born of arrogance and dismissal. "Go ahead, walk away. You won't survive a week without me." I had walked away. And in doing so, I had found not just survival, but a life more abundant than I had ever imagined possible. What do you do when someone tells you that you can't live without them? You prove them wrong. You build something so magnificent that they're forced to watch from the shadows, knowing they underestimated the very person they should have valued most. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who should have recognized your worth? How did you respond? Share your story in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share to help others find the courage to walk away from those who diminish them and toward the life they deserve to build for themselves. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And remember, your value isn't determined by someone else's assessment. It's revealed by your own belief in yourself.